disagree. What's up guys, Enkiri here, and today we're going to cover the recent Instagram post from Dr. Horschig of Squat University. Now, Dr. Horschig is a physical therapist who is also a fan of Olympic weightlifting, as well as a strength coach. And I'm sure you've heard of him. He's got almost 2 million followers on Instagram. He's pretty popular on YouTube as well, and he posts some really good stuff. I'm not going to lie. I follow his content, and I actually enjoy a lot of it, quite a lot of it, and I find it to be useful overall. He knows how to brace properly for heavy squatting, unlike some other physical therapists that we've all heard of.
Breathe out and tighten down.
And recent tidbits that he has posted on his Instagram page, such as all of these, are fantastic. You know, he is spreading the word, man, and it's important for guys like him to preach these sorts of messages because he has a heck of a lot of outreach, but also because when somebody is in his position, a physical therapist, a doctor, when somebody like that is promoting the positive benefits of real strength training, that is when it really starts to resonate with lay people, because lay people are kind of used to hearing the opposite message from medical doctors and other learned individuals. So that's all good stuff, right? But the good doctor posted a little gem a couple weeks ago on his Instagram page, and he asked if we agree or if we disagree with his opinion here. And well, frankly, I disagree 100%. And if I could disagree 200%, then I would disagree 200%. And I will tell you why. This right here is kind of a hot take, in my opinion, of course. Bitch. And it actually accomplishes the opposite of Dr. Horschig's usual posts. It actually does a disservice to the community. It dissuades people. It reinforces the archetype that there's this absolute perfect form that needs to be adhered to, and that even minor deviations, a slight knee cave, are a bad thing, that increase injury risk. And when assertions like these come from someone with the credentials that Dr. Horschig has, they're taken as gospel by lay people, right? Just look at the blowback that I received just a couple years ago now for daring to critique somebody with the stature and credentials of Jeff Cavaliere, right? Those credentials hold so much fucking weight. So those words carry equally as much weight when they come from somebody who possesses them. And because of that, people like Dr. Horschig need to hold themselves to a higher standard. I hate to say that, but they need to hold themselves more accountable. They need to understand the widespread impact that their words can have because of who they are, because of the positions that they're in, how many people follow them, and the credentials that sit behind their name. They need to hold themselves to a higher standard and perhaps analyze their own words a little bit deeper before they go on to post a hot take such as this one. And when he made this post, I kind of saw the blowback, the immediate and widespread blowback from the strength training community specifically here, who by and large completely disagreed with Aaron's assessment. But that is a little bit different because that is a biased population who has enough experience to know better overall. But when you have the kind of outreach that Aaron has, well, you're obviously digging deeper and deeper and deeper into less experienced training subgroups as well. A lot of people that don't have experience in the weight room or don't have very much of it are following you. And I can even see that in my own Instagram feed. Most of the people that I follow on Instagram are people that I know from real life who are, by and large, normies who don't really lift, but a lot of them still follow the Squat University Instagram page. So now we take those people who do not have very much firsthand experience at all with weight training, and in them, we re-ingrain the concept. We reinforce into their heads what they have already heard their entire fucking lives, that there is a high level of inherent internal danger involved in lifting weights, and that form must always be absolutely perfect. Otherwise, you're risking a negative outcome. And it might seem innocuous to a lot of people when you put something like this on paper or publish a thought like this on Instagram, right? But in my opinion, the real world impact that it has is actually quite detrimental overall. Not only does an assertion like this one from somebody as smart and experienced and educated as Dr. Horschig is provide ammunition for people who are already vocal about weight training being bad or dangerous, and there are plenty of people like that, trust me. Incidents like the recent Ryan Crowley one bring those people out from the shadows and into the forefront of comment boards across the internet. Just take a look for yourself. Those notions of weight training being a stupid activity for stupid meatheads are not dead and gone like many of you guys, and me, myself included, probably often sometimes think that they are, right? They're very much alive though. And even though, as I discussed in my own video, that it was not weight training per se that caused Ryan Crowley's injury, that is still very much the watered down conclusion that many people are automatically going to jump to when something like that happens, and have automatically jumped to. And somebody with Dr. Horschig's resume publishing hot take talking points like this is simply reinforcing that false narrative and confirming the bias that people like this already have. And the other problem with this is the nocebo effect. Now, we discussed this concept last week in regard to another famed physical therapist, Jeff Cavaliere of AthleteNext.com, noceboing his 11.5 million subscribers, basically into being scared of their own fucking shadows. And now, Dr. Horschig is basically doing the same thing here that Jeff Cavaliere often does, just in a slightly less obvious fashion. He frames his post like this is a for your own good kind of thing, right? But in reality, I don't think it is. I'm inclined to think that this right here, this exact kind of post, is the stuff that scares people out of trying their hardest in the gym. In my opinion, it is posts like this one that scare people into remaining small and weak for the duration of their training careers. And I've seen this time and time again firsthand, honestly, since before I even started doing this thing as a job, right? I had several friends who I worked out with back in the day, and the ones who were timid and overly obsessed with minor form details struggled to make progress for years, while the rest of us left them in our fucking dust. It just ends up becoming an endless and painful cycle of paralysis by analysis. And these days I see it with clients every now and then too. Someone will start off working with me, they'll be very, very timid with the weights at first because they're scared of getting hurt or ever using less than perfect form. And part of my job as their coach is to assuage those fears and even unteach certain ideas that have been ingrained in their heads for years on end. Because the fact of the matter is, you eventually have to push those notions to the side, at least to a degree. Otherwise, you will never be able to lift aggressively enough to create the disruptions needed to make impressive progress in the gym. Point blank. And I will defend that assertion until my death. Now, is that an excuse to lift like shit? Or am I saying that lifting like shit with terrible form is an acceptable thing? No, of course not. Just take a look at the lifting form of some of my own lifters, some of my own clients. Some of them have good technique and some of them have immaculate technique, to be honest. But in all cases, they almost always have better technique now than they did before we started working together. In spite of the fact that I'm actually encouraging them to be a little bit less anal retentive about their technique overall. So that's kind of a little irony for you right there. But this is something that we focus on primarily for the sake of optimizing our training and maximizing the training effect of each training session. It's not necessarily something that we do or something that we focus on from the standpoint of mitigating injury risk. In my opinion, that's primarily going to be a function of my programming, for one thing, as well as how my clients handle their own lives outside of the gym. Nutrition, sleep, stress, etc., etc. And I'll obviously counsel people on those latter aspects as best I can, but at the end of the day, I can't hold your dick for you. And ultimately, you have to figure out how to execute those pieces for yourself. But the overall point is, you simply cannot be scared of the weights. If you're always scared of the weights, or you're always scared of getting hurt every time you step foot in the gym, or you're scared of minor deviations in lifting form, then you simply aren't going to make the kind of progress that you are hoping to make. And there are two great ironies with Dr. Horschig's assertion here. First, excuse me. First and foremost, anybody, literally anybody who can squat 650 motherfucking pounds with a hip shift and slight knee cave can squat 500 pounds with immaculate technique for probably a minimum of 5 fucking reps. That's basically 75% of their 1 rep max. It would not, even if they're used to using the hip shift and using the knee cave and using those compensations even at sub-maximal weights, it would not take very much undoing to unlearn those habits at 75% of 1 rep max, because that weight is candy for how strong that motherfucker is. And I get that the doctor was probably using a large discrepancy between the numbers here, mostly for dramatic effect, but if your point can't stand under hyperbolized conditions, then it can't really stand at all, can it? Still, a much more reasonable assertion would have been using 500 pounds with perfect form versus 550 pounds with slightly imperfect form, though former representing approximately 90% of the latter in this case. Then you might actually have somewhat of an argument if and only if you disclose the degrees of imperfection that you are referring to here, which Dr. Horschig did not do. And so otherwise, this is simply a masturbatory exercise no matter how you fucking cut it. And the second great irony present here is that he has presented you with an impossible hypothetical scenario to begin with, because anyone who is as obsessed with their technique as Dr. Horschig seems to want you to be just in general, anyone who's like that is never, I repeat, is never going to achieve this perfect 500-pound squat that he's speaking of. I will go on record right now as saying that to get to that point, to become a 500-pound squatter and beyond, requires some level of willingness to deviate. Not an intent to deviate, but a willingness to do so when the situation mandates it. And those who lack that willingness simply lack the X factor that is going to allow them to get to this point to begin with. They simply lack the mentality that is required to become truly strong. I fucking promise you that. If you have the X factor, then you will be willing to deviate when the situation calls for it. And in the long run, you will likely progress much further than the guy who doesn't have that X factor. Point fucking blank. Ultimately, and ironically, leaving you with the ability to potentially squat 500 pounds with immaculate form at some point many years down the road, while the other guy is still struggling to hit 2 plates with perfect fucking form. And again, I am absolutely not encouraging you to lift with shitty form. I think that we should all strive to optimize our own lifting technique on each and every lift that we consistently perform. What I am encouraging, however, is approaching your training with a different mindset from the one that Dr. Horschig outlines here. Instead of viewing weight training through a lens of negative reinforcement, why not try viewing it through a lens of positive reinforcement instead? Some people have that X factor that I was talking about intuitively, and some people don't. But for those who don't have it, it can be instilled in them, at least to a degree. And on the flip side, its absence is also something that can be reinforced. And that's what this post is doing. Thus, personally, I never fearmonger the people that I'm coaching. I never tell them, stop doing this thing because it's going to hurt you. Instead, I frame it the opposite way. I tell them, let's try to do this other thing instead, because that's going to help us drive more progress in the long run. Dr. Horschig says in his post, quote, "The idea behind this post is to make you think about keeping technique quality the most important factor in your training," end quote. And I simply disagree that is where the lifter should be focusing the majority of his or her mental energy. Instead, the majority of the lifter's mental energy, especially where strength training is concerned, should be put into being aggressive and always dominating the weight. And that is because good technique or great technique or immaculate technique, whatever you want it to be or whatever you want to call it, good technique should ultimately become an automatic byproduct of proper training, proper programming, and proper coaching anyway. And the thought process behind attaining good technique each and every training session should eventually become relatively minimal, as the motor patterns should eventually become somewhat of an autopilot thing for the lifter. And if that doesn't happen, then you're doing something wrong. Now, every lifter is going to have their negative tendencies that will creep out every now and then and reveal themselves in their technique, right? But eventually, the fixes to those issues should be able to be distilled down into just one or maybe two simple cues that the lifter can implant into their brain prior to each set. But it should not be, hang on, fucking loud ass cars, man. But it should not be this whole big to-do. That is what leads to paralysis by analysis. That is what hampers effort. And ultimately, that is what stifles long-term progress. And I just wish that people like Dr. Horschig would realize just how much influence and outreach that they actually have. And just how far the ripples of negative reinforcement assertions like this one can reverberate, and the potential long-term and negative detrimental impact that they can have on shaping the training dogma of this generation and the one that comes after it. I think that an assertion like this one by somebody as respected as Dr. Horschig is actually a massive disservice to the community as a whole. I think it's going to scare many a newbie gym goer into forever remaining small and weak and never seeing the type of progress that they are hoping to see. And I think that hot takes like this one are a stain on an otherwise solid overall body of work. And while I know that Dr. Horschig is not going to respond to this video, and he's not even going to see it most likely, but if he does, I would encourage him to perhaps reconsider his stance here. Consider amending it to a less extreme degree, and maybe to analyze a little bit deeper in the future before he considers making another relatively extremist post such as the one in question. A doctor should be a beacon of logic and moderation. This take here, however, was actually quite extreme. And logically speaking, anybody with two brain cells to rub together knows that, assuming the two hypothetical lifters in question here are within 100 pounds of body weight of each other, anyone with two brain cells to rub together knows that there is no permutation of reality where a 500-pound squat is more impressive than a 650-pound squat. It just is what it is, man. Anyway, I think that pretty much covers it for today, guys. If you're interested in online coaching or training programs, be sure to visit my website, www.enkirielitefitness.com, for more details. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please remember to hit the like button before you go, share it around so we can get some damn views, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to leave me some love in the comments down below so that we can try to get some attention from our special friend at YouTube, Mr. Algorithm. Keep training hard, and I will catch you guys next time.
Hello.